Yeah, because you remember.
6 o'clock.
Then we're running.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Lesson number 18, Riyadh as-Saaleheen. We've got about 4 chapters that we're looking at today. The virtue of loving others for the sake of Allah, and this follows on from what we were looking at in the previous lessons, loving your parents and respecting them and keeping family ties. Last week we looked at those people in society, in our communities, who deserve the most level of love and respect. And now we're talking about a general sense of love that we have as believers for one another. How to recognize true love, which is an interesting chapter. Warning, then, okay, so then once we move on from love, we have another important chapter, and an important thing that we need to address is a warning against harm. Because harm and suspicion destroys everything from the above. You know, your family, then your connection between you and the people of goodness, and you with one another, with us, with one another as lay people. So, these are the 4 chapters that we're going to be looking at today. So the Imam al-Nawawi in Riyadh as-Saaleheen starts off by saying the virtue of loving others for the sake of Allah, encouraging to inform others of it and how it is said. So this chapter basically has 3 aspects to it. The virtue of loving one another for the sake of Iman, the encouragement to do it, and the encouragement also to inform one another of your love for them for the sake of Iman, and how a person goes about in saying it. Before we begin what the Shaykh says, what's important for us to know is that Iman and love and hope and ambition and all of these good characteristics that we feel that we have, and we should always try and encourage to improve on, are all aspects of Iman. So I've put down here that love has been made a part of Iman and a sign of the truth. And we know this also from our Sharia, but what is interesting, Imam al-Nawawi brings an ayah to talk about the love that the people of Iman have for one another. Muhammad Rasulullah, he is the messenger of Allah. And those people with him are firm against the kuffar, and we're going to talk about that within its own context. It doesn't necessarily mean violent, it doesn't necessarily mean disrespectful. But here's the point here, without digressing and talking about our connection with the non-believers, ruhama bainahum. We have love, we have mercy, we have compassion, we want genuinely good for one another. If something good happens to your brother, to your sister, you are genuinely happy that it's happened for them. If some kind of difficulty befalls them, you genuinely have some kind of concern and sadness that affects you. Tarahum ruk'an sujadan. So now, as a result of that love and that compassion that they've built, you will see them making ruku and sujood, and they are seeking the bounty of Allah and His pleasure. And you will see that as a characteristic on their face, as in the characteristic of their Iman, their love, their ruku, their ibadah. You will find that on their face. Not necessarily a particular mark, but you will be inclined to those people who are sincere. You will sense it from them. So this is the point that we're making here, that it's part of Iman. It's confirmed in our Sharia, but interestingly enough, this is a characteristic that has also been mentioned in the Torah and in the Injil, in the revelation that came before us. And as if this isn't enough as a virtue that Allah has mentioned us, bi'idhnillah, Allah include us in this ayah and those people who love one another for His sake. But the point here is that there is a great deal of virtue that your mention has been mentioned in the Torah and in the Injil itself. And those people who are sticking to the Torah and the Injil today are devoid of this, arguably, all of this. Having a messenger of Allah that they follow sincerely, having that love, that bond connected because of their level of love for Allah and their messenger. Then the effects of that compassion within society being recognized by the acts of worship that they perform themselves, hastening to do good deeds, hastening for ruku' and sujood, seeking Allah's bounty and His pleasure. And you will see the effects of all of this in the character and maybe even the physical appearance of a particular individual. It might not be far-fetched to say that sometimes you can see somebody and he's pretending to be pious, but you can just tell that something's not right about this person. Whether he's a Muslim or not, maybe he's a non-Muslim, and you find many of those people who are saying that they are pious and they're non-Muslim. You'll even find some of them claiming to be prophets, claiming to be God even, and you will find that, you don't even have to listen to his argument. You can just look at him and think, it doesn't sit with me. سِيمَاهُمْ فِي وُجُوهِهِمْ مِنْ أَثَرِ السُّجُودِ. You will find that characteristic, that the etiquettes, the behavior, the body language, the manners, the respect that they give for other people, other human beings, not necessarily Muslims. You will find that in their makeup. And this is a characteristic that Allah has given of this ummah, because of their love for their messenger, for their Lord, for their messenger, and they have with one another, and the connection that they have with Allah in seeking the akhirah, that this has been a fact that remains until Yawm al-Qiyamah, and it remains there in the Torah and the Injil. It's a proof. It's a proof for you are a proof for mankind. And this is why Allah also mentions in another place that on Yawm al-Qiyamah we will be a proof for all of the ummahs. وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا الدَّارَ وَالْإِيمَانِ. So another ayah here, we're talking about Surah Hashr, and this is talking about how people migrated from Makkah. They left everything. They left their homes, they left their families even behind, they left sometimes even their babies, sometimes even their children, sometimes their wealth, sometimes absolutely nothing, making hijrah for the sake of Allah with not even a vessel of water to carry them on a journey that they have to make through the desert all the way to Medina. But when they made it to the other end, by the mercy of Allah, they found people who were able to sacrifice their homes and their houses. Why? For the sake of Iman. So a person comes to you from another city, another country even, and you say, look, your house, my house is your house. You're more than welcome. وَالْإِيمَانِ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ. They have a level of love because of the fact that they have Iman with one another. And they've committed this act of obedience to Allah that they themselves have not done, this hijrah. وَلَا يَجِدُونَ فِي صُدُورِهِمْ حَاجَةً مِّمَّا أُوتُوا وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They have a need. We all have needs. I mean, you've got something that is prized for yourself, your laptop, something in your bank balance. You've got a plan for what you are working towards. Allah is praising this level of love that only this ummah can surely have. And even, media admits to that. There's always reports after Ramadan or when there's a calamity that happens, etc., that, the Muslims are actually praised, even in the media, even with all the things that have been said about Muslims in the media. This is one of those things that they can't deny, that we are actually the very most generous in the UK, and the amount of Sadaqa we give, nobody can ever match, and they haven't been able to match for a very long time. And this is the connection, and this stems from our love. And like I was saying, everyone has something that they've got planned for, everybody's working towards something. The Ansar, when the Muhajirun came, they sacrificed absolutely everything. Look, I've saved up 10 grand because I want to get married. I said, Khalas, you know what? You need it more than I do. You can take it all. You can take my house. You can take absolutely everything, because of the level of love they had for one another. And not only did they give, but there was no ill feeling. There was no attachment to that thing that they actually had love for once they let go of it, or once they offered it. And they didn't just offer it and say, well, I hope he says no, I hope, he becomes shy, I hope he just thinks that it's just a gesture, because it genuinely wasn't. Allah makes testament to that in this ayah. وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ. And the ayah completes by saying, whoever is saved from the wickedness and the stinginess and the miserliness of his own self, then they are indeed those people who are successful. Now, if you could look at both of these, I'm pretty sure that's enough, to be honest, to talk about this topic, because if we talked about this in further detail, we'll be here for an hour easily. But if you look at the connection that we have, Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those people who are firmly on the side of Iman, because this is the next characteristic that we find in this ayah here. Why are they in the side of Iman? Because they are firm in their ibadah, because they have ikhlas, and they want Allah's Jannah. And you will recognize that in their aqwal, in their statements, in their characteristics, in their manners, in the level of respect they show to one another. And this is the hujjah and the proof for mankind that there will always be goodness on earth. I mean, you can go, for example, in the midst of a battle, Syria, or I don't know, I can't think of anywhere that's worse than Syria right now, but Syria, go right in the middle of Syria, you'll still find people of Iman doing something good. You might think that you're on hell on earth right now, you know, the amount of chemicals, little children being killed with chemical warfare, it's just absolutely despicable. But you will find these characteristics there because these people believe in Allah and His Messenger. And this is a proof. And also in this ayah, you will find that these people are genuinely not connected to the dunya. There is something greater than that, and it all stems from the level of Iman that they have in Allah and seeking the last day that enables them to love one another and genuinely sacrifice, make that sacrifice for one another. And a point I wanted to make before we move on, why is Sadaqa called Sadaqa? Anybody know why is Sadaqa called Sadaqa? Sadaqa comes from the root word of Sidq, Sadaqa, same root word, Sad, Dal and Qaf. And that is the same root word as truthfulness. When you give in Sadaqa, it's not that if you give in Sadaqah, but you're genuinely attached to it, or you've got Riyah in it, like I'm looking, somebody else is looking, I'm going to give £50 so that everyone can say I'm so generous. That's not Sadaqah. Allah's not going to accept that from you. If you give because you feel that you're pressured to give, that's not Sadaqah. You've not done it for the sake of Allah. If you are genuinely parting with something that is dire to you, it might not necessarily be money, it could be food, it could be absolutely anything, but you do that for the sake of Allah, for the sake of Iman, for the sake of love based on Iman and respect and compassion and wanting to be of assistance to those people who have Iman and are more desperate than you are, then this is clearly showing that there is a level of truthfulness that you have with Allah and His Messenger and those people who believe. Because you know that you are parting with this thing for something which is greater that's going to be given to you as a substitute. And that can only happen if a person has Iman and Yaqeen. And this, for me, I feel this is probably one of the reasons why, even though that the Iman of the Ummah right now is weak, you know, many people are involved with shirk and innovation, etc. But it's that thing that people actually believe in the Akhirah, that I give £10, I know it's going to get multiplied, at least by tenfold. It could be 700. It could be limitless, I don't know. Even like the person who's practicing shirk would have that idea that, you know what, Allah's going to give me something in return. And that, I mean, is unparalleled to any other religion, because we have such a firm yaqeen in the Akhirah. As a comment here, this was revealed about the Ansar when the Muhajirun immigrated from Mecca, and here we also have some different principles that the ulama have brought about when it comes to preference. In the dunya, it's mustahab for a brother to prefer his brother over himself, as long as he won't be harmed. As long as he won't be harmed. So, for example, my brother needs a mobile phone, I've got two, genuinely you can have one for free. It's not going to harm me. Yeah, obviously it's going to set me back, but I can probably go and buy another one, it's fine. So as long as you won't be harmed, preferring your brother over something in the dunya is mustahab, not wajib, mustahab. And it's a sign of that sidqa that we were just talking about in Iman. But what happens in acts of worship? So for example, we both entered the masjid together. There's only one space left on the front saf. Do I say, no, I want to prefer my brother so he can have the reward and I will sacrifice my reward in the akhirah for my brother? This is the only time where you will have to become stingy, where you have to become selfish. And the ulama have actually got a phrase for this. It's actually a terminology. They call it ithar bil qurb. That a person, when it comes to his brother or himself, he must hasten to look at himself. Yeah, there's many ayat, there's many proof. One must prefer himself over others in acts of worship and reward. And the brother, Sheikh Ahmed, he quoted the ayah in Surah Mutaffifin. Allah is telling us, after describing the Jannah, then you, all of you, start competing with one another. This is the competition that you have. There's also another point that we can gain from this, is that one must have righteous company and not prefer harmful isolation. Or, even worse than that, unrighteous, ungodly company. And we can see this from both of these ayat, that Islam is not going to be established in isolation. We need good people around us to help us to do good. And that's how communities are formed. That's how families are kept together. That's how masajid are fruitful. Otherwise, when things like this are removed, when love for one another are removed, that's going to have an impact on the ummah, it's going to have an impact on individuals, and it's going to make your iman weak. Even if you're in the corner praying 10 juz a day, yeah, you're still not going to be complete in your iman as long as you've not got righteous company around you. And you've not got that love to express to other people. What's the point in you reciting so much Qur'an and you've got no one to implement it with? That makes sense. Hadith 375. There are 3 qualities, whoever has them will taste the sweetness of Iman. And there's 3 qualities here mentioned, but one of them here is that you love Allah and His Messenger. To love Allah only for the sake of Allah. To love a slave of Allah only for the sake of Allah. This is the bit I was looking for. There's other 2 characteristics here that we're going to sidestep for now. If you have this quality as well as the others, you will genuinely taste the sweetness of Iman. And this is the point that I was making a minute ago, is that how many of us actually have tasted that sweetness of Iman? How many of us have actually seen your brother walking past? He doesn't know you're there, you're sitting in the car, he's walking past the traffic light, and you thought, you know what, let me make dua for him. And as long as I'm looking at him, making dua for him, for his akhirah, for his dunya, for his mal, for his children, that is the sweetness of Iman. And when you see that, you will feel that attachment. Wallahi, you will feel that attachment. You will feel in yourself that you have done something good for your brother, even though it's just verbal, but it's sincere from the heart, and it's something which cannot be replaced, because it's an act of worship that you are connecting between you and Allah for the sake of your brother. That's just one example, but there are plenty of examples on how the sweetness of Iman can be fulfilled because you love a slave of Allah only for the sake of Allah. How many people go out to Syria, they're not very practicing, but they come out practicing Syria for the right reason, not for the wrong reasons, where they go out for Sadaqa and helping people, etc. Not like some people in the media today who are absolutely, there's no words for people like that, unfortunately. Completion of Iman, which creates a love for Allah and His Messenger. What happens when you have that? Hadith number 376, that's in the dunya. You will have a reassurance given to you as hidayah from Allah that you are doing the right thing. You wake up in the morning, you pray salah, go about your day, you meet your brothers, you have that level of Iman, and you will find that level of acceptance in your life. Things will go your way. And you will think, subhanAllah, where does this come from? And that will increase you in your Iman. Things will be made easy for you. You have a stress or a worry, you think that you're going to become separated from your family, but then Allah gives you the visa that you felt that you're never going to get. Allah gives you the grade that you felt that you're never going to get. Allah makes you understand something that you thought that you never get. That a job that you sacrificed for somebody else or for the sake of Allah. That's from the sweetness of Iman. And when you realize that, you will feel gratitude in your heart. That's in the dunya. But what happens in the akhirah? 7 people Allah has guaranteed. And these are just 7. There are many others that the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, for example, that is not mentioned in this hadith. For example, the Prophet ﷺ said that a person will be under the shade of his Sadaqa on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Here we have an example where the Prophet ﷺ said 7 people Allah has promised to shade with the shade of His throne on a day when there will be no shade. What is that day when there will be no shade? Some people who are outside of the shade of Ar-Rahman on that day, may Allah save us from that, will have the sun directly above their heads, and they will be drowning in their own sins. But there are certain categories of people who will be saved, and from them 2 people who used to meet one another and depart from one another only for the sake of Allah, because they had that love. Genuinely, you ring your brother, I want to come see you, we're going to get a meal together, we're going to talk about our dunya and our akhirah, only for the sake of Allah, and you leave one another only for the sake of Allah. Not for the sake of a football team, not for the sake of computer games, not for the sake of going to a particular restaurant just to try it out. Our lives aren't very, very long, and I'm sure you can appreciate that. I believe there was a death recently, not so long ago, of a young man here in Loughborough. It can happen at any time, brothers. Don't think that, this can happen, it's going to happen, I'm going to live my life, and there's a particular part of my week or weekend which is completely devoid of Islam. It doesn't work like that. Islam has a part of your life in every single decision that you make in your lifestyle. So I wouldn't say that, using your weekends in any other way, or any other time in any other way, would be better than you having ikhlas with Allah and then having ikhlas with one another. And if you do that, imagine what could happen. Because this thing here is not about one person, he meets him on one Friday in his 80 years. No, this has to be continuous, where a person genuinely has people around him that he meets on a regular basis only for the sake of Allah. And if he does that, he will be under the shade of Ar-Rahman. But now, having said that, I don't want to sound very mundane and try and make Islam seem as if it's a very strict religion. No, it doesn't necessarily mean that you sacrifice all of your pleasures and all of the things that make you laugh and all of those things that entertain you, etc., for the sake of living a bored life where you're supposed to be in tasbih 24/7. That's not what Islam is. Islam is about you sorting out your intentions. That's basically what Allah wants from you. So you could go out for a pizza with your friend with ikhlas that I want to meet him so I can fall under this hadith. A pizza, you're getting rewarded to eat. And obviously now you are conscious, so you're not going to go to a place which is haram. You're not going to go to a place where there's haram activities or there's certain things that are going on which are not appropriate, etc. So you're going to channel the way that you act upon this. But nobody is saying, and this is one of the biggest things that people don't understand, Islam didn't come to suppress your desires, Islam came to channel them. So Allah doesn't say that don't have relations. No, have relations, get married. Allah doesn't say don't eat. No, just don't eat the wrong thing. Every single thing has a way for you to enjoy, definitely. But it has to start off with this level of ikhlas, that person. Next hadith. Reward of being on the arsh will only happen to those people who Allah has favoured. Certain people will be drowning on that day. Hadith 377. On the day of resurrection, Allah the Exalted will say, where are those people who have mutual love for the sake of my glory? Today I shall shelter them in my shade when there will be no shade except mine. Allah Jalla wa Ala on Yawm al-Qiyamah will say, where are those people mutahabbina fiyah, that used to love for the sake of me only, for my glory? And this adds to the reward, because imagine that day is going to be a day of a lot of anxiety, a lot of distress. You're going to be very, very worried. You don't know what's going to happen after this day. You don't know where you're going, etc. So if Allah is making this call, and then the angels affirm that you are actually from those people and they push you in the right direction, not only is that an elevation for you in the akhirah, but it's also a humiliation and a rebuke for those people who didn't correct it. Because one of those things that happen on Yawm al-Qiyamah is when things are said on Yawm al-Qiyamah is to elevate and to reassure those people who are going to be successful and to always add more humiliation on those people who are already being humiliated. After the standing on that day, so now we've had the dunya, now we have two hadith that have occurred on Yawm al-Qiyamah, what happens in the akhirah. After the standing on that day, he is then called by the characteristics on the day of judgment, the characteristics of love, and then 378, by him, Prophet ﷺ is saying, by him in whose hand my soul is, you will never enter Jannah until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. This is part of Iman. You will not enter Jannah until you correct that level of love that you have for one another. Don't think of it as being something trivial. So if you think in your heart, yeah, I think he's a good Muslim, but there is something that I always going to say about him and him and him, and there's always going to be something that I can say about absolutely everyone in the masjid, or in my community, or in my household, then there is a problem. There is genuinely a problem, and it is feared that there is going to be a restriction for him for Jannah. Because the Prophet ﷺ has clearly said it, you're not going to go to Jannah until your heart is clean towards other Muslims. It's not possible. May I inform you of something? If you do, you will love each other, promote greetings, say salamu alaikum to one another. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you go around saying salam and then you can still harbour those feelings and think, well, I'm safe now. That's not the point here. The point here is that the Prophet ﷺ said in another hadith, the mu'min is somebody who other believers are free from harm in their statements and in their hands. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying here, how can you genuinely, how can I say, peace be upon you, but in my head I'm waiting to do ghibah of this person. Assalamu alaikum to him, but I'm ready to rip him off. Come to my business, Assalamu alaikum, come in, sit down. Let me thinking in my head, conspiring about how I can rip him off and steal his money. Is that salam? Is that the essence of Islam? The Prophet ﷺ is saying, from the very moment that I meet you, sincerely say salam to your brother, peace, Allah's salam upon you. From then on, my conversation, my interactions, my conversation, my behavior, everything that I have towards you is based on that salam. After all of the above, we've looked at in the dunya, we've looked at 2 hadith on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and then we're looking at the ticket that you need to go to Jannah. There is a conclusion in Jannah itself, which enables us to prepare now. The Prophet ﷺ said, a man set out to visit his brother. I think we took this hadith last week also. A man set out to visit his brother for the sake of Allah in another town. So the angel said to him, why are you visiting him? Is it because there is a favor? Is there any kind of dunyawi benefit at all? He said, no. By Allah, I have no desire except to visit him because I love him for the sake of Allah. So the angel then said, I am the messenger to you from Allah to inform you that Allah loves you back. And we looked at this hadith last week. But I mean, like I said also last week, that this angel could be any of us today. I mean, it could happen to any of us today. This confirmation from Allah could happen to any one of us in our lives today. It's not just a fairy tale story that's going to be plucked out and, just a nice fancy way of saying, love each other. It's not about that. It's not about that at all. Sincere love and care for your brother then leads to hadith 380. The Prophet ﷺ said about the Ansar, only a believer loves them and only a hypocrite hates them. Allah loves him who loves them and Allah hates him who hates them. Why the Ansar? Because of that level of brotherhood and all those things that we've just mentioned before. When you see your brother and you see him upon khair, how can you even think, anything bad about him? You see him constantly in the masjid, you see him trying to rectify himself, you see him, he may have mistakes and he may have flaws, but you see genuine good traits in that brother. How can you then have any kind of ill feeling towards your brother? And if this is the Ansar, this is an example of the Ansar. The Ansar gave up their homes, gave up absolute. One of them even said to the other, you can have my wife, I will divorce her for you. I genuinely love my wife, I've got kids with her, but I will divorce her for you. This is the level of love that they had, and this is the sacrifice that they made, the Ansar, for the sake of brotherly love and connection. So how is it possible that you see khair in your brother, and still you want to create some kind of enmity within society? Like you're itching to say something about him. And now, like I've said before, it's become so trivial now. I mean, people are hating one another because of football teams, because of who's each other following on social media, and their own personal likes and dislikes, and it's becoming absolutely ridiculous. And I even know of one incident that's happened recently. 2 brothers, they shared the same room for 9 months. They came up from the same mother, and now they're arguing over a few pounds with one another. They share the same room, they can't share the same money. This doesn't make sense. To love and follow those who came before us so that we can be united with them. This is another benefit that we can gain from 380. Is that when we see that model that's already been created by the Ansar on how they showed love to one another, I don't think anyone today, I mean, it'd be hard pressed to think of anybody who could say, listen, you know what, there's the deeds of my house, take it, for the sake of Allah. But they did that. They genuinely did that. Here's my mortgage, here's my 20, 30 years of, work and toil, take it for the sake of Allah. That's the example that's been set by the Salaf, and that's why they are the Salaf. But if we follow that example, not necessarily to that level of quality and extent, but we follow that principle in our lives, then that's the only way that we can have this ummah change, and how we can gain liberation for ourselves and become united. 381, Allah the Exalted in Hadith Qudsi has said, for those who love one another for the sake of my glory, there will be seats. Now look at this. Yawm al-Qiyamah, this is a promise. There will be manabir made out of light. There will be thrones of light that there will be placed for those people. And it's also been narrated by Ibn al-Qayyim and other narrations, but the way Ibn al-Qayyim talks about it, he talks about it as if it's a story. So Allah Jalla wa Ala will call the people of Jannah, and He will say, O people of Jannah, come, there is a meeting, very important meeting that you're going to have. So they all come to this designated place, and then the arsh comes of Ar-Rahman, and it's, put in between all these people. Now, the closer you are towards Allah in worship, in piety, that's how close your arsh, your own arsh, will be to His arsh on that day. Some people will be higher, and some people will be looking up, and they will think, wow, like a star in the sky, some of the narrations say. So like just as we look at the sun, that's the distance that will be there between one person's arsh and another person's arsh. And some of those arsh will be made out of gold, some of them out of silver, some of them out of pearl. And this specific one for those people who genuinely had a clean heart for their brother in the dunya. No ill feeling, not even one. He's purified. If something came, he purified it. He just shunned it. for those people who are living that life of constant purification, they will have an arsh made for them out of light. And then they will be called, because there's already been an invitation, so they're being called because there is an important meeting that they're going to have. They have no idea that this is going to be a meeting with Allah. So they're called, and the angels will come and they will place down cushions of misk. Cushions of misk. So they're not allowed to sit down straight away. They're being ushered to their arsh, VIP treatment. The cushions of misk are placed down. Then they will say, please sit down, calling you by your best name. And then Allah Jalla wa Ala will come down with His veil of light. And then it will be lifted, and everybody who will enter Jannah will be able to see the face of Rahman on that day. Allah make us of them. And those people who have these lights, these manabir of light, will be envied by the prophets and the messengers. So like we were saying, people will be looking at other people's arsh on that day. Prophets and messengers will look at the arsh of another person, and they will think, who is that person? Is it an angel that's sitting on that chair? And they'll be told, the Prophet himself and the martyrs themselves will be said, no, those are the people who used to love each other for the sake of La ilaha illallah. How is it said? Remember, the chapter is talking about the encouragement to do so, but then how is it said? There's a very interesting story here, and I'm going to just summarize the next two hadith in this hadith here. Abu Idris al-Khawlani, now he was one of the imams of the Salaf. He was born in the 8th year after Hijrah, so he's very close to the Prophet ﷺ's Hijrah. So he was born at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but they've said that he didn't actually meet the Prophet ﷺ, even though his father was a companion. He died at 80 after Hijrah. So he was one of the imams of the Salaf. He was one of the very earliest of the second generation after the companions. Imam al-Dhahabi described him as saying that he was the Qadi of Damascus at his time, as in, the most religious authority within his generation. He said, I once entered a mosque in Damascus, in Dimashq. May Allah aid the affairs of the people of Syria. I happened to catch sight of a very young man who had very bright teeth, and he was smiling. He had a cheerful face. A number of people were sitting around this young man, even though he wasn't very young, but he looked young. And when they differed over anything, they would refer to him and ask him for advice. So this masjid, Abu Idris is going to this masjid, and he's seeing this man attending this masjid. He has no idea who he is, but he's seeing a lot of attraction towards that man, and he had a very, very pleasant face. And if there was a serious issue between brothers, a very serious one that needs judgment, they would go to this man. Eventually, he asked, who is this man? And he said, that is Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anh. So the next day he said, that's Mu'adh ibn Jabal, that's the companion. All that time he's been there. He's been a companion of the Prophet ﷺ ever since the Prophet ﷺ made hijrah. The next day he said, I'm going to go to the Prophet, to the masjid to speak to this companion. But found that when I went there, he was already there before me. And he was praying salat. So what I did, and this shows us the level of respect that we have towards the people of khair, that we don't want to disturb them. We use, etiquette and respect. So he sat next to him and he waited for him to finish. And then when he finished, I came in front of him. Again, etiquette, not talking from the side of him, not making him move, etc. And this we also find this in the hadith of Jibreel. Jibreel came in and sat in front of him. And he sat in front of him in the same manner. And he greeted him with the salam. And then Abu Idris al-Khawlani, complete stranger, he said, by Allah, I love you for the sake of Allah. I've learned of who you are. So Mu'adh ibn Jabal said, for the sake of Allah, are you sure? So Abu Idris said, yes, for the sake of Allah. Then he asked him again, for the sake of Allah, are you sure? Abu Idris said, yes, of course, for the sake of Allah. And this happened a couple of times. Then Mu'adh ibn Jabal said, Abu Idris said, that Mu'adh ibn Jabal took hold of my cloak and drew me close to myself. So now he's grabbing him by his cloak and he's hugging him. And he's pulled him very close to him. And this, what we do, is a way of celebration, isn't it? He said, rejoice, because I heard the Messenger of Allah saying that Allah Jalla wa Ala himself says, my love is due to those who love one another for my sake, meet one another for my sake, and visit one another for my sake, and spend in charity for my sake. So this is a story, and this shows you, the understanding of the Salaf also. Hadith 383, when a man loves his brother, let him tell him that he has said it. So now what we have learned from this one particularly is that if you love one another for the sake of Allah and you express that for the sake of Allah, look what happens, that you then will be included in a hadith Qudsi. And bi'idhnillah, you could be on that arsh made out of light. Because Allah is saying here that my love and Allah's love is guaranteed for those people who love one another for His sake and visit one another for their sake and they help one another for Allah's sake. 384, Mu'adh again was told by the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ grabbed his hand. So now we can see the affection that Mu'adh is passing on, that he's learned from himself. The Prophet ﷺ, one time, he grabbed his hand and he said, "O Mu'adh, by Allah, I love you for the sake of Allah." And Mu'adh did the same thing to Abu Idris as a physical connection in expressing the love for the sake of Allah. And out of love, I want to give you a benefit and a gift. What did he give? Did he give him a voucher? Did he give him his mobile phone? Did he give him the deeds? No, he didn't. The Prophet ﷺ gave him something which was far better. He said, before you make taslim, some of the ulama say after the taslim, make sure you say, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrik wa shukrik wa husni ibadik. Oh Allah, help me to remember you, express gratitude to you, and worship you in the best manner. Hadith 385, Anas bin Malik reported a man was with the Prophet ﷺ when another man passed by, and he said, "O Messenger of Allah, I love that man for the sake of Allah." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Have you actually told him that?" He said, "No." So he said, "Go and tell him." So when the man went up to tell him, he told him, "I love you for the sake of Allah." Then the other man replied, "May Allah, for whose sake you love me for, love you too." And the Prophet ﷺ approved of this, exchanging of greetings. One of the ulama, al-Mannawi, said, in explaining this, what this means is that it's mustahab for us to express our love based on Iman for the sake of Allah. Not for any other reason, not for kindness, not for trying to make other people happy, etc. It is genuinely done for the sake of Allah. Because then it ensures that the bond will last longer and make it stronger. If you genuinely see that a person is a person of khair, and that he loves Allah and His Messenger, and you see only goodness from this person, this is what then would qualify you to say that I love you for the sake of Allah. Not just because he says La ilaha illallah and he's got a pretty beard and he goes to the masjid. It's not about that. It's not about the superficial. It's about the benefit. It's about the attachment that you have to that person and the respect that you have for that person for the sake of Allah. And if that person has that, then you should be advising him and reminding him of that love and that bond. And you would do that by greeting him in this manner. And this is what Manawi is saying. When you do that, that level of companionship will get stronger and it will last for a long time. And it increases and it multiplies in love and it brings people together. Thus the Muslims will be united. But how are the Muslims going to be united when the quality is not there? You see the point here? Love is based on Iman. If the Iman is weak, then the love is going to be weak or non-existent. What we have to do is build individually on our own Iman. Then, only then, can you love each other for the sake of Allah truly. Otherwise, it's just superficial. And troubles and grudges will dispel. If your Iman becomes weak, the love becomes weak, then troubles and grudges will not dispel, it will multiply. And this is one of the good features of Islam. And like I said, this is already found in the Torah and the Injil, and it will remain Yawm al-Qiyamah, because there will always be people upon this way to reckon. This is one of the ways, the symbols of Islam, as Manawi is saying. This is one of the symbols of Islam that no other religion has. How to recognize. Now, okay, it's very easy for us to say, well, I love Allah, and I love Him for the sake of Allah. But how do you recognize that true love in your life? How to recognize the love of Allah upon a person and encouragement to seek it? So it's not about us saying that we love Allah. What the most important thing is that does Allah love you back? And this chapter here is talking about how you can recognize that. Ibn Taymiyyah has a book or a small essay which is called Qaida fil Muhabba. And in that he talks about a lot of benefits and a lot of spiritual benefits and Iman boosters, as what we call it nowadays. Very beneficial treaty that he talks about it. So basically this chapter has got sprinkles of that on it. And he said in the chapter, in the essay, he said nobody acts. Now every single one of us makes a movement or an action connected to love towards that thing. So if I'm going to sit back now and close my eyes, it's because I've got a love and attachment right now to relaxation. If I'm thinking about something like, something completely random, it's because You were thinking about it because of that love and that want and that need and that attachment to that thing. Otherwise you wouldn't be thinking about it. Why would you think about it? Would I be thinking about what? 1,000,000 times 5 million or whatever it is, or how many zeros I'm going to put on it? You have no love, you have no want, you have no need, you have no attachment to it. But if there is a love, an attachment and a want and a need towards anything, he's talking about human nature, he's not talking about a religious sense. If we can understand that that's how the human makeup is, then you will realize how to gain the love of Allah. It's quite simple as that. I mean, it makes it sound simple, but that's what he's saying. Nobody moves or does anything except because there is a love or a want or a need for that thing. Nabil. Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. Again, this is ayah which is known as the ayah of imtihan, the ayah of testing. And Hassan al-Basri called it that. Why? Because it's not about you saying you love Allah. It's about, have you got the love of Allah in your life? That's the most important thing. Because on Yawm al-Qiyamah you can come and say, oh, Allah loves you. But then the proof against you, then you've lost. The point here is that, have you found acceptance with that claim that you are making? قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ. If you think you love Allah, then follow the Prophet ﷺ. Then Allah will love you and He will forgive you of your sins. Al-Qadi Iyad, he said, it should be understood that the one who loves a thing gives it precedence, and giving something precedence is in accordance to that love that he has towards that thing. Otherwise, he is not sincere and he's just a pretender. And I think he actually used this ayah to prove that also. Should I repeat that? He's saying that if you love something, then you will elevate that thing above even your own desires. And the amount of love that you have for that thing will determine the amount of preference that you give to that other thing, to your own desires. And if you don't have that, then you are not sincere and you're just a pretender to that love. Or there is a great deal of weakness. You could be sincere, but there could be a great deal of weakness. Allah says in the next ayah that Imam Nawawi quotes here, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَن يَرْتَدَّ مِنكُمْ عَنْ دِينِهِ. The point here is, if you turn away from the religion, and if you turn away from loving Allah and following His commands, and the love of the Prophet ﷺ and following his commands also, then Allah has promised here that He will replace you with a group of people who will worship Allah and have love of Him. And nobody is guaranteed to die and live upon Iman. Even though you may have it now, nobody is guaranteed that. Nobody is guaranteed steadfastness until Jannah. The one who sincerely loves the Prophet ﷺ is the one whom signs of that appear in his life. The first of which is that he ends up following his example, adhering to his sunnah, trying to emulate him in word and deed, complying with his commands, avoiding that which is prohibited, and striving to follow his teachings in times of hardship and difficulty and ease, and when he is feeling energetic and when he is feeling lethargic. Now, this is quite straightforward. You might understand this. You might relate to this quite easily. But there's something that I wanted to point out here. Is this bit here, following example, adhering to his sunnah. Now, some people unfortunately think that you have to have long hair, and you have to have henna in your beard. You have to wear particular clothing to emulate his sunnah. You have to wear leather socks when it becomes winter. None of those things are included here. None of those things. What it means is that you follow the objective that he came with, which is to create a connection between you and your Lord, to understand who your Lord is, to understand what Islam wants from you. So if a person has henna in his beard or another person doesn't have henna in his beard, that doesn't necessarily mean that he has more Iman than him. And this, in actual fact, was actually a sign of nifaq at the time of the Salaf. That a person appears to be a nice, good, practicing Muslim, but if he has statements and he's issuing statements of insulting and swearing, and his manners are not depicting the piety that he's trying to project, maybe he's got sins, so you will find plenty of people, beards, thobes, Friday night, smoking cigarettes, wasting time, going out, having a laugh, maybe even swearing, maybe talking at extensive length about things that don't benefit them in the dunya or in the akhirah. That, for the time of the Salaf, would think, this man is talking like that. That's clear nifaq. Because even at the time of the Salaf, they used to do that in their own quarters, not even openly, so that they'll be found out. So my point here is that it's not about your image. It's not about the way you look. It's about the mindset that you have. And we've talked about this plenty. So we should give precedence to what he has prescribed and encourage over our own whims and desires. Hadith 386, Allah Jalla wa Ala has said, I will declare, and this is a lengthy hadith, we've looked at this before, but Allah in this hadith is saying that those people who are devout worshippers of Allah, then nothing will be more beloved to that devout worshipper than Allah himself. And he gets closer to me by doing what is obligatory upon him. And then he continues to get closer to me by fulfilling all the nawafil, and continues to get closer to me with optional acts of worship until I love him. Until Allah Jalla wa Ala loves him. And when Allah loves him, your hearing is used for the sake of Allah. Your sight is used for the sake of Allah. Your hands are used for the sake of Allah. Your legs are used for the sake of Allah. And if you were to ask Allah for something, He will surely give it to you because of that connection that you have with Him. And if you ask for protection from Allah, surely Allah will protect you. Ask Allah to make us of these people. But look here, again, we're not talking about superficial behavior. We're not talking about those people who go out for 3 days, they stay in the masjid, they can do whatever they want, they can talk about the whole dunya and everything it contains, and then leave, and then they think they've attained piety. It's not about that. It's about tawheed. It's about learning the objectives of this religion and fulfilling that correctly. One will only follow what he loves. This is again from Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. A person will only follow what he loves, even if he loves something, but will follow what he loves more. That makes sense. You love something else. Which one will you follow? The one that has more love and ikhlas, you have ikhlas towards. So if it's your desires and Allah, then you will either, whichever one of those you love more, you will end up following. That is directly found here. So sometimes we see, now you know that you're not supposed to be seeing that, and you probably might even remind yourself, but then you might prefer yourself or you might prefer Allah. Hearing is the same. So your hands are the same, and the hands are probably even more amplified today than it has been ever in human history, with mobile phones and tablets, etc. And our feet. Therefore, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, there is only one ultimate thing that you love. Why? Because there is always something that is going to be superior. Thus, anything below it will always be connected to that superior form of love. So now, some people will only worship Allah if it satisfies their desires and their conditions. To give an example, you wake up in the morning, is it more beloved for you now just to look at your phone and turn around and go back to sleep, or to switch the alarm off, take the duvet off and say the dua and then go to the bathroom and pray? Not pray in the bathroom, but obviously do wudu, etc. Now, if you go back to sleep, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't love Allah, but right now, the love of Allah has become primary or secondary? Secondary. If you get up and pray, that doesn't mean that you don't love sleep, but that has become separate. That's what Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah is saying. That there's always going to be something which is the pinnacle of your love. And that stems from what he has said before, that every single one of us move and act and have some kind of engagement with the creation based on love and want and need. And whatever you aim to fulfill, that is your superior connection of love connected to that thing. 387, when Allah loves a slave, how do you know Allah loves you? When Allah, connected to the ayah before, but how do you know Allah loves you? And you can see this sometimes with certain people. When Allah loves a slave, Allah from above His arsh calls out the name of that person. And He says, Ya Jibreel. Jibreel comes close. And Allah says to Jibreel, I love such and such person in the dunya. So I'm commanding you, Jibreel, to love that slave. Then Jibreel instantly loves him because he follows the command of Allah and he doesn't disobey. He doesn't think about disobeying or obeying. It's just how he is. He obeys. Allah tells him, love him. He loves him. Khalas, he loves him. Jibreel, an angel with 600 wings, loves you. After that, it doesn't stop there. It's not just the creator and the ultimate creation, or one of the biggest creation that Allah has that moves. After that, Jibreel alayhi salam announces to the inhabitants of the heavens that Allah, Ya Ahl Sama, Allah loves such and such person, so love him. So all of the people in the Jannah ends up loving that person, and it's a series of connections of love. Then that love gives him acceptance on earth. How do you know Allah loves you? Then you will find acceptance of your good deeds on earth. You will find the things going your way. You will find Allah facilitating your affairs. If a difficulty befalls you, Allah makes it easy for you to find a way out. If there is some kind of goodness that comes to you, you realize that this is not from your own arrogance and your own haughtiness. You show that appreciation to Allah. And you might even have interactions with people where people love you and respect you and etc. All of that stems from the people of the Sama loving you. All of that stems from all of the people, all the angels loving you. All of that stems from Jibreel himself, and that Jibreel has been commanded from Allah Jalla wa Ala. Ibn Taymiyyah again, rahimahullah, in the book, the love of Allah, sorry, this is somewhere else where he said this, the love of Allah has no limits. Now you can personally think, now if I was to ask you, what is the most beloved thing to you from the creation, from a dunyawi sense, you might think of a particular meal, you might think of a particular thing that you're connected to, it might be your mother, it might be your family member. That love always has to be limited. Because, for example, say you love your mum more than anybody. That's understandable. There's no harm in that. But are you going to love every single thing that you have about your mum? No, because she's a human being. She's going to have flaws. She might say something which is incorrect. She might tell you to do something which is wrong one day. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said that the love that you have for your Lord has no limits, because He is perfect. And everything He does is perfect. And He, in His actions and His names and His attributes, are infinite. So how can your love ever be limited for such a being which is like that? And it can never, so if it is not limited, it can never end up being blameworthy, and it can never end up being negative. There is no negative consequence out of you loving Allah. Never. And there is no shunning, or nobody can ever criticize you for loving Allah. Or maybe even loving Allah too much. 388 Hadith Aisha radiallahu anhu said the Prophet ﷺ appointed a man as the head of an army expedition, and when he used to lead the salah, he used to end each rak'ah with surah al-Ikhlas. So when they went back, they told the Prophet ﷺ, they said that this man, he's got something that we've never seen you do. And at the end of each rak'ah, he finishes surah al-Ikhlas. So say for example, he's done in the first rak'ah Fatiha, Duha, and then he'll finish it with Ikhlas. And in the second rak'ah, Fatiha, An-Nas, and then Ikhlas. It just became habitual for him to finish it. So the Prophet ﷺ asked the companions who made this complaint, go ask him why he's doing it. So he said, Wallahi, there has the sifat of Ar-Rahman in it. The characteristics, the names, the attributes, the actions, the description, the uniqueness, the freeing from shirk, because there's nothing, those characteristics that are found in Surah Ikhlas cannot be attributed to anybody else or anything else. It's just Allah, it's pure Allah, Surah Ikhlas. And I love to recite it, I love to contemplate on it, I love to proclaim it. So the Prophet ﷺ said, tell him that the one he loves, do you think he's not going to love him back? Do you think he's not going to elevate him just like the way that he is elevated, that respect is not going to be mutual? Never. Never. There are no bounds to that. There is nothing negative to that. And this incident also shows that there is a wisdom and the love of the companions, the wisdom of the companions and the love of the companions that they had for Iman and Tawheed. Again, going back to the point that we were making earlier, that following the Sunnah is not something which is superficial. It's not about how white your thobe is, or how high your thobe is, or how black the hijab. It's not about that. It's about equality, and it's about understanding Iman and Tawheed. And they knew how to, once they understood Iman and Tawheed and what Islam wanted from them, they knew how to direct that love based on the correct understanding of Iman and those actions. Ibn Taymiyyah again says, excessiveness in loving something without knowledge creates deviation and removes actual love. If you were to love that person that you love the most, for example your mother, more than that she deserves, and you go into excessiveness in that, what happens? It could even end up in people worshipping other human beings. It can even create deviation in the way you think, in your thought, and in your life, in your akhirah. And as a result, what will happen is that love will then soon turn into enmity. It will soon regress itself, because it's not channeled in the right way. Love based on pride, but without knowledge, will create anger, and this will also remove any actual love. been talking for a while. Shall we take the next two chapters, or shall we leave it there? What do you think? So today's lesson has actually been about love. The next two chapters talking about warning against harming one another, harming the pious, and freeing ourselves from suspicion, which is obviously connected to loving and keeping that love and that bond intact. I don't mind.
I don't mind you.
The most important students.
Question here. My question is, in the dunya, if you're striving to do good, fulfill your obligations, and do your utmost to please Allah, but at the same time in the dunya you are not trialed with hardships. I don't know if it's a hadith or a quote of the Salaf, but it goes on to say that if you are granted the dunya, the luxuries within it, and you are trialed, and you aren't trialed with anything, then consider this as a punishment from Allah, as Allah grants those who love the dunya everything, and often think because I often think because I am not trialed, Allah doesn't love me. And if you're given luxuries, look at the Iman of this person. May Allah increase them. They want to be tested so that they can have the love of Allah proven to them. And the fact that you're living in luxury makes them worry that they are getting it in the dunya and there's nothing left for them in the akhirah. It was one of the characteristics of the Salaf, but it's not something that we should go out and seek. Allah doesn't want for us hardship. Allah doesn't want us to live in a life of difficulty. In actual fact, 3 men came up to Aisha and they asked, how is the Prophet ﷺ? He prays, he stands all night, he fasts successively. So one of them said, I'm not going to get married. One of them said, I'm never going to eat, I'm just going to fast. One of them said, I'm going to stand all night. The Prophet ﷺ got angry and he said, Man raghiba an sunnati falaysa minni. This is not talking about does he get married or not, or does he eat or not. He's talking about the excessiveness. Ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari is saying the excessiveness. That excessiveness is not encouraged by the Prophet ﷺ, even though he was like that. And even if some of the Salaf were like that, that's not what is encouraged. What is encouraged is that we understand what Iman and Tawheed is. We understand what Allah wants from us in the practicality of our religion, and we remain steadfast upon that. And if any difficulty comes on the way, you don't lose that foundation that you've created for yourself. And it could be that you live a long life of luxury and you still end up into Jannah. That is very, very possible. But the point here is that you live within a balance of having hope and fear, and you continue remaining steadfast. So if you are tested, then you are tested in the right manner, and you see it through with the right mindset. But who's to say luxuries isn't a test? Who's to say luxuries isn't a test? That's also one of the biggest balaya, I would say now, rather than the actual test itself. Because those people in Syria are being bombed day and night. They are actually improving in their Iman. From what I've seen, some of these people, they're actually improving in their Iman. I actually know one person, he said before this war started, and this is just an example, before this war started, you ask them the pillars of Islam. The pillars of Islam, they won't know what it is. The pillars of Islam. They struggle to put it together. You ask them the meaning of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, they're Arabs. They will not be able to give you a sufficient answer that this is what it means. Now, look at the situation. People dua to go in there. People are helping them. People are increasing their Iman. Obviously, there's still a lot of fitna there. There's a Khawarij there. There's all these different things. But with tests in today's day and age, people are becoming better in certain areas. But luxuries, people are actually becoming worse. Barakallah feek. It looks like it's a lot, but it's not a lot. So if you don't mind, we will continue, inshallah. Because I think it's very, very important. Rather than leaving it as a separate session, it's very, very important. Connected to what you just said, and connected to what the question is just asked. Why are we going through what we're going through? Is because we have this level of superficial Iman, connection with Allah, and a superficial level of love with one another, which is then making it easy for us to plot and harm one another. It's become very, very easy. And nobody even thinks about it. Even the most pious of people you'll find making ghibah very easily. And I've even witnessed this myself, you know. What is harm? Warning against harming the pious. What is harm? And this is pious, Imam an-Nawawi is saying, but it doesn't necessarily mean pious. Pious here, we're talking about anybody who's saying La ilaha illallah. Ibn Rajab has a book, and I'm going to take a lot of these statements here from Ibn Rajab's book. You can find it on the website here. We translated it and we gave it out for free. So there's no copies of it before you ask. But there is a book here, this one. All of it is here in 15 parts. We put it into different segments. The difference between advising and defaming by Ibn Rajab Hanbali, and one of the Mashayikh of Medina explained it, and he gave some very beneficial comments on it, and we're going to look at that now also. So in this book he asks, what is harm? So if a person is advised to stay away from another person because of a particular fault that the person has, so that the person being advised can avert himself from harm and sin, then this is commendable. If there is a genuine reason for you to advise about another person, you know, brother, you know, don't listen to that brother, he lies a lot. And I'm only saying this genuinely because we're trying to make him better, but we need to, you know, be reserved in our approach with him also. However, so that has now become the default. Ghibah has been set on this precedence. That let me tell you about that person who did that thing. No, trust me, I'm being sincere to you, but all they want to do is spend 2, 3, 4 hours talking about how evil this person is, and not making it proportionate to that one thing. I'm sure we talked about this before. To that one thing, then they'll talk about his whole dunya and his whole akhirah. However, and this is not the point. The point here is that you avert yourself from that one aspect of harm for yourself and for your brother. But also, what does it mean? Do you leave him like that? Leave him destitute? That's not what Islam is about. However, so Ibn Rajab is talking about another aspect of what harm could be. However, if the intent is to describe the mistakes of another person purely for the sake of exposing his sins, then this is haram. And there is no difference of opinion on that. And it's a despicable action. وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْذُونَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بِغَيْرِ مَا اكْتَسَبُوا. Those people who harm the believers, male and female, without any due right. I want to talk about this brother and talk about this brother and talk about it. No, but I'm being sincere, genuinely being sincere. Akhi, what are you doing with the love? You're just destroying with your tongue the love of Allah that you have with Allah. You think Allah's going to like that action? Definitely not. What's going to happen between you and Allah then? That's number one. And what's going to happen as us, as a ummah, as a community, as a household, as brothers, as a masjid, as, you know, as a university? بِغَيْرِ مَقْتَصَبُوا. There is no reason. This does not exist in that statement, in that conversation, in that meeting. فَقَدْ احْتَمَلُوا بُهْتَانٌ وَإِثْمٌ مُبِينٌ. He has clearly slandered his brother, and he has got a clear and manifest sin that he's going to come with on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And when he's going to be standing in front of the whole of mankind that's there, that sin is going to be made manifest, clear. Allah protect us. Ibn Rajab then goes on to say, it's very lengthy here, he says, therefore, having bad thoughts about another person, especially if there is no basis, then this is something which has been made haram by Allah and His Messenger. Where does it start off with? Did he say having bad statements? Love. Love is very, very important here. Secure that bond of love. Repel that thought, because when you harbor that thought, what happens? That's when it becomes easy for you to start speaking. Surely presuming something about another and basing a negative opinion about such a person on this presumption are from the vices which lead to evils and corruptions to spread. Look at what's happening in society. I don't know if there's any society that's free from this right now. Negative opinions have spread. This has led to sins and crime, and all difficulty and hardship that's affecting mankind is because of people's bad thoughts towards one another and their etiquettes towards one another. And this is clearly haram. In such an instance, the one with bad thoughts about the other has not only sinned by himself, by having a presumption. Look, he's not even said anything. It's just a presumption. Just by you thinking, yeah, you know what, I think he's done something wrong there. And he's not made an excuse when that excuse is possible. He's not sought to remove that fault in that brother because of that love he has. What he's doing, he's got a bowl of love and he's picking at it. He's picking at it because just of his thoughts. In such an instance, the one with bad thoughts and presumption, but has combined this sin with other severe sins, which is then to attribute a lie, then he starts slandering him, then he starts ghibah, then he starts trying to create divisions in his house and, the seal, the ties of kinship are then, compromised, etc. An extension of all of these evil consequences, the one with these corrupt presumptions will increase in his malevolence. He will then not think that he's doing anything wrong. Nah, this is jar wa ta'deel, this is we're preserving the religion, and it will lead to an influx of hatred and enmity and lacking of piety and controlling of one's tongue. It becomes very difficult for you to reverse it. Can you reverse ghibah? Becomes very, very difficult. The Prophet ﷺ said, a type of sihr is your speech. All of which leads to one, backbiting, slandering, being envious, hating, violence, ties of kinship, all of these things. People usurping either. If I don't have respect for my brother, and I've picked out that bowl of love, and there's actually no love left, or there's only a little bit left, I can rip this brother off easily. 20 grand in my pocket, no problem. Allah says the opposite in Surah Duha. فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمِ, rip him off. A young yatim comes to you, an orphan comes to you. What do you do with him? Have bad thoughts? He can't defend himself. You can do absolutely whatever you want with him. Allah says, فَلَا تَقْهَرْ, don't be oppressive of him. Don't assert yourself over him. وَأَمَّا السَّائِلْ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. If a person comes with a genuine need, brother, preserve that bowl of love, that vessel of love. I'm talking about being a vessel. Ibn al-Qayyim has a parable between a vessel, a plate, and your heart. If the plate is full of nutritious food, then you are going to benefit in your body, the rest of your body. If the plate is full of half and half, there's some good things on that plate and there's some bad things on that plate, then it's going to corrupt the rest of the plate and the rest of the body. If the plate is empty, there's absolutely nothing there, and you've not nourished it and you've not cherished it, Iblis is going to come and he's going to put all of the khabith on that plate for you. That's your vessel, which is the same parable as your heart. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. And he described, Ibn Rajab again here, and he described, Allah Jalla wa Ala, the believers as those who are patient and sincere in advising one another to the truth based on compassion and mercy. And we can add now to this, with the context of today's lecture, love. Yeah? So if you see something that you dislike, patience, sincerity. Where's your love gone? It's very easy for us just to get rid of it. The word akhi and ukhti has become so cheap. So cheap. Wallahi ladhim akhi, I know one person, he ripped another person off with grands recently. The reason why I mentioned 20 grand just now is because this has happened recently with another brother, and he just ripped him off. And that's a lot of money. That's 3, 4, maybe even 5 years savings for some people. He just ripped him off. And they're both practicing. Whereas the faces of the immoral one vary from his wicked intent, from wanting to spread evil, exposure of sin. So now the person who has no love, he has multiple faces. The person who has love, whenever he sees good, he genuinely becomes happy. He encourages it, he nourishes it, he praises the brother. And the more he increases in that, he will come one day and knock on your door and say, Akhi, I love you for the sake of Allah. But now if that same brother, he's seen something bad in him, he'll be disappointed, but he'll be patient. He will advise. He will be sincere, and he's protecting that love. Now, the person who doesn't have that love, what happens? He pretends to show love, but he has many immoral faces. So one of them, exposure of sin. If it suits him, he might want to seek superiority over the other person. If it suits him in another context, he will want to create enmity. He wants other people to think. He's just going to plant that seed. I won't say anything. I'll just plant that seed. You can make up your own decision about the brother. And the great satisfaction he sees in harming his brother, that is the conclusion. When love is devoid, he sees satisfaction in harm. Harming your believing brother is a characteristic of who? Shaitan. There's no other doubt about that. The one who makes kufr, disobedience and sin fair seeming to the children of Adam, so that they can join him in being in eternal hellfire. And this is how Allah says, Inna shaitan lakum adu. Shaitan is an enemy for you. So realize and take his enmity towards you very, very seriously. Those people who are acting in this manner have been affected by shaitan. That's what Ibn Rajab. There are many hadith, everyone knows saying there are many hadith, and we've talked about this hadith just in the previous chapter, and there's another hadith, 389. The one who performs Fajr prayer comes under the protection of Allah. Every day when you pray Fajr, And some of the ulama say it has to be in jama'ah, but the correct opinion here is that it doesn't have to be in congregation. As long as you've prayed fajr in its correct time, then you are fi dhimmatillah. You are under the protection for the rest of the day with Allah. And there are other narrations which talk about other negativities of those people who leave fajr. So beware lest you are then questioned about things that you owe. What does that mean? You woke up in the morning with ikhlas. Now we've just talked about this before. You've taken it, you've had the battle, you thought to yourself, khalas, you know what, I'm going to switch the phone off and I'm going to the bathroom. I've won that battle now. I love that thing more, which is the salat. Khair. Now, once you've prayed the prayer, you are under the protection of Allah. Then the Prophet ﷺ is saying now you have done something which is monumental to your day. You have now been put into a contract between you and Allah. You have a protection with Allah. So beware lest Allah questions you about what you owe Him. If you're going to go about the rest of your day spoiling that protection by spoiling the level of love that you have with one another, then Allah is going to hold you to account. Didn't I protect you for that day? And then you just spoiled it for yourself. For if He questions anyone of you and he falls short of fulfilling the duties which he owes Him and to the other believers because of that level of love being compromised, He will require him and throw upon his face into the hellfire. He started off by praying Fajr. He ends up where? In the hellfire. Why? Because of the love that's been compromised. Last chapter, promise. To assume of other Muslims by what is apparent, this is very, very important. You love one another, you secure that love one another. You don't have bad thoughts about one another, and you don't speak. But how do we preserve all of that? We only can preserve all of that by going by what is apparent. And to leave the private affairs and do not be suspicious. Do not be suspicious. Even if your brother has talked to you in the wrong way, he's looked at you in the wrong way, he's done something in the wrong way, don't be suspicious of him. Make excuses. If they have made tawbah from shirk and they've affirmed for themselves Iman and Tawheed. Point number 1. He's got Tawheed. He is establishing the prayer. He is giving the zakat. He's fulfilling the pillars of Islam, and he is being compassionate towards his other brother Muslim. Then leave them alone. فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَ. Don't even have any kind of suspicion. Don't follow them up. Don't presume. Don't think, well, he only said he's only doing these good deeds because of, X, Y, and Z. And this is mentioned in Surah Tawbah. 390, I've been commanded by the Prophet ﷺ to fight people until they say La ilaha illallah. And once they've said La ilaha illallah, then they are protected. And their affair is left with Allah. I'm not going to hold them to account at all. I'm not going to have any kind of suspicion towards them because they've entered into Islam. And this is a characteristic of Ahl Sunnah, as been mentioned by the Shaykh here, Shaykh Saaleheen, Hafidhullah. As for Ahl Sunnah, look what he's saying. This is a characteristic of the safe sect. There are other sects who are not safe because they don't have this characteristic. Ahl Sunnah, then they are balanced between those people who are mentioned before. Some of them are extreme in love, and some of them are completely negligent in love. And that then affects your level of, interaction with your brothers and sisters. Perhaps the above mentioned mistake have been apparent because of the weakness of people in the Iman and the disease in their hearts when they start having suspicion, etc. This is what he's talking about. If one was to observe the method of correcting with the major scholars and of knowledge, they will see how to advise and to continue to do so with sincerity and wisdom. If you Ahl Sunnah, it's a point of you being on the correct manhaj here now. If you have love for your brother, then you will learn how to correct your brother. If you don't learn how to do that, then you will fall into deviation. It becomes an aqeedah point here now. However, there are those people who wish to fish in murky waters, seeking to pick out, the water is dirty. It's already dirty. Let's go fishing in it. Would you do that? Does that make sense? Seeking to pick out mistakes from obscure matters. I can't even see into the water and I'm going to pick out something. They're going to try and pick anything random out with the only objective of expelling his brother by making, his mistake seem worse than it is. And in the worst case scenario, he takes him outside the fold of Ahl Sunnah. Now you might think that's minor, but Muslims are doing that with Muslims. What does it mean to say that this person is not a Salafi anymore? He's not from Ahl Sunnah anymore? What does that mean? The Prophet clearly said that there are 73 sects. And there's only one that's going to Jannah. And that is those who follow the way of the Prophet and the Salaf of this Ummah. Understood? Now, if I was to say that this brother, he listens to a particular sheikh, or I've got presumptions about him, or he's doing particular sins that I don't like, and that means he's not a good Muslim, or he's upon a deviated way, or I've got nothing to do with him, I'm going to cut him off. What that means is that he has left that one way that's going to Jannah, and implicitly you have said that he's on the way to the hellfire. Just by listening to a particular sheikh, or just by particular mistakes that he may have. But what happens, if you are sincere, the way of Ahl Sunnah is you preserve that love, you cherish it, you nurture it with sincerity and wisdom and patience. And this is the advice of Shaykh Ibn Baz, and you can refer back to this, it's on the website. 391, whoever says La ilaha illallah and denies of everything which is worshipped besides Allah, then his property, his blood become inviolable. You can't, it's a sanctuary, you can't go against, you can't transgress that. And it is for Allah to call him to account, if he was to go again. Miqdad ibn al-Aswad, radiallahu anhu, he once asked the Prophet ﷺ, O Messenger of Allah, if I meet an enemy, look at this hadith. For me, I mean, if you think about this hadith, if people understood this, Muslims, non-Muslim alike, it would solve all of the problems of the whole dunya. I really genuinely believe that. That's how important I think this hadith is to take context. Miqdad al-Aswad, he said, O Messenger of Allah, I'm on the battlefield. Right? I'm on the battlefield. I'm not in the streets of London stabbing people randomly. I'm on the battlefield. He's my enemy and I'm his enemy. And we are both going at it. And we are both trying to kill each other. This is a genuine war. Now, look what he says and look at the response of the Prophet. He said, if he cuts one of my hands off with his sword, yeah, and he cuts off my hands with his sword, then he hides from behind a tree, and he then says he has submitted himself to Allah. Right? So now I'm gonna retaliate, and at that moment I'm about to retaliate, he says, no, I'm a Muslim, la ilaha illallah. Am I allowed to kill him? The Prophet ﷺ said, do not kill him. So I submitted, but then he said, but Messenger of Allah, he cut off one of my hands, and he only said it to save himself. So now look at this, yeah? He's saying, he's already cut off one of my hands. I want to get my payback on him. And now he's saying, La ilaha illallah, so I don't get my payback on him. Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do not kill him. For if you do so, he will be in the position in which you were before you killed him. As in, he will be considered being a Muslim, and his life become inviolable. And you will be in a position of making testimony that you will no longer have that sanctity for yourself. Now you will have to answer for yourself. You will have to answer for yourself. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying here now, listen, and the ulama have also extended by this by saying that if a person, he might not even necessarily enter into Islam, he might even say, I want truce. I'm not a Muslim, but I want truce. Don't kill me. Take me as a prisoner of war. Do whatever you want, but don't kill me. So now what he is saying, he's put his arms down. He said, I'm fighting with you anymore. Are you allowed to kill him? You're not allowed to kill him. That's how Islam preserves life, to that extent. And I don't know if there's any other law, or any kind of other, martial combat law, I don't know if there's any international law surrounding this, which would hold a person to account for killing somebody who says he wants truce. Islam takes it that seriously. There's also another hadith, which I'm sure you're aware of, Osama bin Zayd, who did something very similar, and he actually killed the person. The person was there, he overcame him, and he said, La ilaha illallah, he still killed him. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, you killed him. Did you kill him after he said, La ilaha illallah? You killed him after he said, La ilaha. And the Prophet, Osama was trying to speak to the Prophet ﷺ, and all he kept saying is, did you kill him after he said, La? And Osama said, after the Prophet ﷺ repeating it so much, he said, I wished I had not embraced Islam until that day. What does that mean? I wish that if I embraced Islam now, then all my previous sins will be forgiven. The reason why the Prophet ﷺ was repeating it was to show Osama the severity of what he has just done. He's killed an innocent person. He's taken an innocent life. The person has said La ilaha illallah and he's taken it innocently. And the Prophet ﷺ is repeating that so that he now is sinking in. The more he's saying, he's sinking in his life in the dunya, but also now his accountability with Allah. So now he's saying, I wish at this moment I accepted Islam so that all my previous sins will be forgiven. What do we understand from this? Okay, there's another narration here which is saying the same thing. What do we understand from this now is that if a person is your brother and he's saying La ilaha illallah, he's praying next to you 5 times a day, he's part of your community, and there's a person who's just said La ilaha illallah on the battlefield to save his life, and that's what you think, genuinely that's what you think, that's the presumption, you're still not allowed to take it. Then what about a person that you see just goodness in, and you see khair in? Why would you want to spoil your Iman, his Iman, and your bond with one another? Why would you want to spoil your connection with Allah and his connection with Allah? Because he is genuinely going to find out. He's going to find out at some stage that you've been saying this kind of stuff. That's going to affect his Iman. It's going to affect your Iman. It's going to affect your bond with one another. And then it affects the whole Ummah. Last point here. Once a person becomes a Muslim and he is a Sunni, then you can't conspire against him. And this is quite clear. Ibn Rajab is saying, as for the people of innovation and misguidance, again, this is an issue of Aqeedah here. Ahl Sunnah, preserve it. Ahl Bid'ah, they're very, very relaxed on it. Loving Allah and having love for one another, it's not really a big deal. They will conspire, they will fall into subsects, adi, it's not a problem for them. Ahl Sunnah want to remain steadfast, but how are you going to remain steadfast without loving one another? Without trying to conspire with one another? How to preserve that level of bond? Those who falsely perceived as being scholars, but in actuality they are not people, they're not even people of knowledge. Some of these people have fallen into innovation and misguidance, and they go around doing ghibah, etc. People consider them as being scholars, but they're not even people of knowledge. Ibn Rajab saying, then it is permissible to expose their ignorance and make apparent their fault with the intention that the masses will be warned against them and not following them. So now he is saying that sometimes it does become permissible for us to talk about people, but that will only be because in order to preserve that bond of love. Umar radiallahu anh, and this is the last hadith here for today, he said to the Prophet ﷺ, in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, some people were called to account through their revelation, but now revelation has discontinued, and we can only judge people based on their apparent. So whoever displays to us something which is good, then we will grant him peace and security. If he appears to be a good Muslim, Sunni, Salafi, good brother, doing good deeds, then how can you conspire against him? He is upon peace and security, and we'll treat him as a near one, as a brother. We have nothing to do with his insight, about his hidden affairs. And Allah will call him to account for that if there are any problems about that. But whoever shows us evil, then we'll deal with him with the level of evil that he shows to us. And if there is a level of evil that we need to expose him for, we will do that. And if there is a need for us to do it, if we can't correct it, then we will correct it. Shaykh as-Saaleheen again it's quite lengthy, but we'll just take one or two benefits from this. He said the author, after talking about some of the points that Ibn Rajab was mentioning here, he said the author here is explaining on how to rectify and how rectification is brought about. It's not brought about by defaming and seeking faults. Rather, it is to respond to a mistake or misunderstanding. It could even be an innovation by explaining the truth. There has to be a response. It's not that you are proactively going out there to defame people. Not to defame. This is the path of the scholars, and there is consensus upon this, and this is how Allah will keep some people united upon the right way and the way of Ahl Sunnah and the way of the Salaf. So you will find the Salaf acknowledging their deficiencies and questioning their own level of understanding, because they knew that a scholar has a chance of getting it right, but they were always prone to making mistakes. Now he's talking about a religious understanding. Do you understand Islam the correct way? And if you have a misunderstanding of Islam, etc. But this is obviously talking about how you understand Islam, but it also applies to people being mistaken and falling into sin and falling into their weakness, and sometimes shaitan getting the better of them. What we need to do is correct our connection between us and Allah. First and foremost, what does Allah want from you so that Allah will love you back? Once you understand that very, very well, it's not possible for you to have that connection with Allah without you having a connection with others from the creation. Once you have that connection with Allah, you will have inevitably a bond with other practicing believers who are trying to fulfill that same objective. Once you have that, don't conspire. Rectify, show patience, give advice. And one of the biggest things that we can't do is have bad thoughts and suspicion. And if we do that, bi-idhnillah, you will remain steadfast upon the right way. Ask Allah to make this beneficial for us all and give us Iman.